Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Alright, so if you've been following along, the last couple of videos have revolved around this project, which was a conformity index calculation basic script. So what it would do, or what it will do, is calculate the R100 and R50 for a PTV, a plan's target volume, whatever volume is selected as the target volume. And then we created a GitHub account and pushed our project to the account. So in this video, what I would like to do is go over some of the ways that we can clean this up to make it more more readable, and just to sort of kind of go through some of the just start thinking about ways that we can utilize some of those best practices that we've discussed before. So we want to make it, we want to think about readability and reusability specifically. This is just a very simple script, but if we were in like a WPF project, or if we were writing like a class library, then we would want to write these things in a way that is reusable. So if you've watched some of the previous videos, one of the ones that I made was on object-oriented programming, and one of the core principles of that is that instead of manipulating data, we want to write programs, like we want to think about programming as though we're manipulating objects. And so that's the whole like object-oriented programming concept, is that instead of manipulating data, we're manipulating objects. And so if you look at this, if you read through this, it's really just a lot of logic, right? So we're just defining variables, we're kind of thinking through this, and if you wanted to come through and read this, you would have to read this like line by line to say, okay, they get the patient, okay, they've gotten the plan, they got the plan ID, so they're figuring out the target. All right, so the structure set, okay. So you kind of get my drift. Like in order to read through this and figure out what's going on, you literally have to just take it piece by piece. So it makes it a little bit difficult, when you're thinking about readability, and then also like, reusing this, right? In order to reuse this, we would have to basically just kind of redefine each of these variables and then figure out how we want to use them, right? So it's really not, this would not really be reusable, none of this. So that's what I'd like to cover in this, okay? So there's a couple of things, okay, so what I'd like to do is, we have our original code, and what I want to do is I want to copy it and paste it so that we can use it, or we can use it as reference later on. Okay, so I'm going to copy it, and I'm just going to leave it there, but I'm just going to put this down here, and we're going to create a region. So in order to create a region, you type in the number sign and then region, and it'll kind of give you that. You can actually, it looks like you can tab it. So I just hit tab, and it completed it for me. Okay, so I want to call this, original code. Whoop, not cold. It is a little chilly outside, but okay. So now, and then I want to paste it. Okay, and then it's complaining because we're outside of the script portion. So, but I'm just going to comment it out, and then I can minimize that. Okay, and okay, so now let's go back up to the top, and let's just try to figure out what we're doing here. So, and another thing, you can see that I added a comment here. I actually added a summary. So just really quickly, if you're above a class, and you hit, so we've talked about adding comments, right? So this is a comment, etc. If that's with to comment something out, you need 2 forward slashes. But if you want to, you can hit with some things like classes, methods, things like that. If you hit, well, it's not going to let me since I already have one. Let's cut this. Eventually, I'll add it back. But if I hit it 3 times, then it will add in the summary thing. Okay, so then we can add in a note and describe like what's going on in this class. That sort of thing. But since I'd already written it, I'm just going to paste it back, and we'll just bring that back. Okay, so I just wrote a simple script to calculate the R100 and R50 of a plan's target volume. Okay, all right, so now let's get to, so the first thing I want to do is I want to write these checks in a way that instead of having to, like if we want to read through this, right, we just have to read and figure out what's going on, okay? But when you're thinking about reusability, right, like instead of this, let's cut this, and let's go down here, and let's just add in a bunch of space, and let's add in actually, you know what, that's the wrong place. Let's add that back, and let's come down here, and let's add in a private void validate patient. Validate patient. Yeah, that should work. And we're gonna provide a script context. Okay. So we'll just do script context. And then just really quickly, this is something I've learned recently. I was watching a video from Tim Corey where he goes over some of the like Visual Studio tips and tricks, and these are like some recent ones that they have been in some of the updates the last year or so. And once you get to the end of your line, instead of, we would normally have to add in our brackets and then hit enter, but instead of doing that, if you just go to the end and hit shift enter, it will do it for you. So that is pretty nice. Okay, so now we've pasted that, and let's add in a node that tells the user what this is gonna do. Okay, so now like if we come up here, let's copy this, and let's just go, and we could just come up here and let's add in a note that says validate patient in current context, and let's say validate patient. Okay, all right. Oh, and then it's complaining because it says that we need a context. Okay, so let's add in the context, and now it's happy. And so, but if you notice, when we hover over this, we don't get any information, right? So that's not very useful. We want to provide as much information as possible. So, if we're not even looking at the code beneath this, and we're just, the very first thing that we're, if we're someone else and we're reading through this code, this is very easy to understand what this is going to do, right? But if we were writing it, then we don't really know what's going to happen if, let's say, the patient's not valid, right? So let's go down here and let's add in so I'm going to type 3 forward slashes, okay? And you can see that it added in the parameter, okay? So it's going to tell us that this is the parameter that's used. And then let's add in a note that says validates that the current context has a patient. Okay, and then if we want to add in it might be useful to know that the script will end if the patient is null. Okay, so let's add in another line that says will alert the user and in the script. Okay. So now let's go up to here. Well, actually, it looks like we can just hover over here. So it says validate, and we can see it right underneath. Whereas if you remember before, there was nothing, right? So it says validates that the current context has a patient. And then it says will alert the user in the script right after it, which is confusing because we've added a new line here. And what we need, this actually took me a while to figure out into Google because I'm lazy sometimes, but I've really enjoyed using this feature. But you need to add a para tag, P-A-R-A, and I'm assuming that it's short for paragraph because I haven't really delved into all of the different tags that you can add in summary. But so now when we hover over, that will alert the user in the script. It's spaced out better, so now it's just easier to read when we hover over. Okay, so that's validate patient. So I'm sure you can guess that we are going to do something very similar for the plan dose, plan and plan dose. So let's do private void validate plan and plan dose. And we'll also take the script context. Okay. And I'm going to hit Shift Enter to add that for me. And so then let's do the same thing. And let's add in a note here. And let's actually just copy this because it's very similar. Okay, and then we'll just edit it. Okay, we'll alert the user and in the script. That's the exact same. So validates the current context has a plan and that plan has valid dose. Now there may be a need to actually write something that just says validate plan, right? Because maybe you don't care if there's dose. Like maybe you still want your script to run even when there's no dose, right? But we're calculating something based on the dose, so we actually don't. So, but that might be an example of maybe wanting another one that says validate plan, right? But but that's also a reason that you might want to, when you're naming this, instead of naming it validate plan, which we could have done, right? But I was a little more explicit in that I said and plan dose, right? Like we could just assume like validate the plan, and just assume that it has dose, but maybe the person that's using this doesn't necessarily care if there's dose, right? And okay, so let's be a plan setup, and that plan has valid dose. Okay, so now if we come up here, we want to do the same thing. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. Validate plan dose, plan and dose in current context. And let's just rename this validate plan and plan dose. Okay. All right. And okay, so that was outside of our try catch. So now we've gotten down to that. And let's see, let me check something really quickly. Okay. All right. So, sorry, I'm cooking dinner, so I need to keep an eye on the timer. Okay, so now let's talk about some of these things, okay? So the patient ID, we only use this for the message. So we have access to the context and the patient. So we'll leave this here. We don't really need this for calculating the R50, right? So let's leave that. So but we'll come back to this later, most likely. All right, so we've gotten the plan, okay? So instead of relying on like the user to, like we could incorporate, like put this into a thing, and give me 1 second. Okay, so I think what I want to do is I want to, so this kind of goes along the same lines as this patient ID. We don't really need to grab this right here, right? So I think what I want to do though is I want to put this into a method, okay? And I think eventually this would be something a little more robust, because say you have a plan sum, and this is something that we would actually need to do, but we're not going to do this right now, because again, this is just a simple script that we want to run for a plan. But essentially there's a difference between a plan setup and a plan sum. And so what we would need to do is there's just some various checks that we need to do and that sort of thing. So, but we won't get into that. So let's just, I've highlighted it and I've right clicked it, and I'm going to, or I've selected that little orange, what was it? So I right click and then I selected the light bulb. So it says quick actions and refactorings. So I just want to extract a method that says get plan, and it provides the, well, let's call this get plan setup. Okay. And so it just provides the context. Okay. And then it just returns that. So now let's add in a gets the plan in the current context. New plan setup. Okay. In the current context. Okay. So now we've got that. So that's easy to read. And let's just add in a note here that says current plan setup. All right, and then this is something that we used briefly towards the end of writing the script, just to show the difference in it saying percent and gray. So we don't actually need this right now. We're not concerned with that. Okay, so the plan ID, again, this has, like, we could very easily just say context.plansetup.id. But I think we're just going to leave it at that. So I think eventually I think we'll get rid of, I don't think we need this. And I don't think we need this either. Okay, so let's do the same thing that we did for the plan setup. Let's just clean this up. Extract method. And we'll say get structure set. Okay. And if we hover down, let's put it down here. So now let's add in another note. So, and this is actually similar to this one, which I probably could have already written it by now, but gets the structure set in the current context. Okay. And then, we talked about this before. So I'm actually going to, well, I won't comment it now because eventually I think we're going to get rid of this, but okay. And I think, let's see, we'll say current, add in that, current plans structure set. Because I think I did it based on the, actually, you know what? I did it based on the context. I think, and this doesn't really matter because if you have a plan pulled in, like we've already checked to make sure that there's a plan pulled in, and and so by default, if the plan is pulled in and it has a structure set, by default, the current context's structure set is the plan setup structure set. Okay, but as you can see, I didn't return the context plan setup. I returned the context.plansetup.structure set. So this would rely on the plan setup not being null. Okay, and oh, whoops, didn't mean to do that. So I think instead of script context, I think what I want to pass in is the plan setup. I think that makes more sense because especially in the and let's just actually call this plan setup. Okay, I think this would actually make more sense in reusability, because like down the road we may not actually have context. Like let's say we're using a like a standalone application and we've actually opened a patient, so now like we can get the plans from that patient. We actually won't have the context So let's see, what was the first thing that we did where we used the context? Oh. All right, I gotta go take out some dinner. Give me just a minute. Okay, so nothing's burned yet. Okay, let's see. Okay, so now this is complaining because we need to pass it in the plan instead. So if we hover over it, we can say gets the structure set in the current context. And actually we need to change that note because that's technically not that useful. So structure set, let's actually just rewrite this and say, because now the parameters changed, so now it's plan setup, and so let's say gets the plan's structure set. Okay. All right. So we've gotten that. So we got the plan, the structure set, and remember we've talked about this, but we wrote this check and we commented it out because we don't think that it's necessary. Well, I should say I don't think it's necessary. I think it's redundant because we've already checked to make sure that there's plan dose, right? So if there's not any plan dose, so something funny about Eclipse, in order to calculate a plan, in order to calculate the dose in a plan, you need to have a body structure, okay? And that body needs to have like you could just create like an organ structure that's named body. That's not going to work. You need a DICOM structure, or you need a structure whose DICOM type is external, okay? And you're only allowed to have one of those in each plan. Okay, so because we know that, then in order to have a body structure, you have to have a structure set. So it only makes sense that at this point, since we've already validated dose, that the plan has to have a structure set. So we don't really need this. However, let's say we, wanted it in, for whatever reason. All we would need to do, whoa, that's not good. Okay, let's do that again. Wow, it says invert. Why can't I? Oh, I remember now. It doesn't like to, for whatever reason, it doesn't like to give me that option. And this is probably just me just not knowing enough, but I don't have that option to extract a method from. I'm guessing it's an if statement, like, because you're just it's a truth statement. You're checking if something, I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So we just need to come down here and type it in. So private void validate structure set. And I almost wonder, this is actually making me think about, because we don't want to pass in the context. That's not, because like we were talking about just a second ago, that's not really relevant in the event that we don't have the context, right? So I'm actually thinking we should pass in the structure set. So, and I think we should actually change the other ones that we wrote. Okay. Okay. And then shift enter to get into there. And then, so if structure set equals null, or if it is null, then, do that. So let's copy this because this is very close. So validates that the that the structure set is not null. Okay. We'll alert the user and end the script. Okay. So I think we should actually provide that here. We should do the same thing. We should provide the plan setup. Okay. And then because, for the same reason, let's do that. Okay, and then up here, well, before we do that, let's do the patient, right? So patient, okay. And let's do this. So, I don't know. You know, this is starting to get away from me now because we wouldn't end the script. We wouldn't. This validation thing really is unique. It's not. I won't say it's unique to the context, like to using it with the context. So, I think actually, let's just leave it the same. And I think what I'm going to do is let's copy that again. So validates that the current context has a structure set. Okay, so let's pass that back in. Script, context, and we need to say context dot. Now this doesn't matter that it's the plan setup. We just need to make sure that the context has a structure set. Okay, so let's do that, and we can actually do that. Well, we actually don't need to do that. So we could actually just comment this out, right? Because we're not going to use this, but this would make sense, right? Like maybe we wanted to, instead of validating that there's dose, maybe we wanted to still validate. So like if we, let's see, where were we? Yeah, so maybe up here, maybe in that instance where we were only validating the plan, but maybe we want to do something with structures, so then maybe you would validate the structure set as well. Okay, so we won't do that, but maybe that would be an example of when you would need to add that validation. So again, we don't need to do that here. Okay, so this was an example of getting the structure the long way, so we won't do that. So we got the structure set. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is get the target, right? So let's refactor. Well, actually, I don't want to take that comment. Well, actually, I don't think it will. Will it? Yeah, actually, I think it did. I think it removes all of this. So anyway, it doesn't matter. Extract method, yeah. So let's say get plan target volume. Okay. And actually, let's get the plan target volume ID. No, actually, we did return the structure. So yeah, plan target volume. Okay. Let's see. Let's get rid of that. Okay, let's add in this. So the plan target volume. Oh no. Oh, I guess that thing that popped up. Okay, so get plan target volume. Okay. And I guess we need to come down here to where it says, it must say like new method. Yeah. Okay, so now let's add in a note. And let's see. Gets the plans target volume. And we need to, so if you remember, we checked if the target was null. So now we need to do the same thing. So let's cut that. And let's come down here and let's say private void validate plan target volume. And let's say structure. Instead of, let's do validate structure. Validate structure exists. Okay. So then we'll say structure. And we'll say structure. Okay. So, see, this this message, we could pass in a message. So let's do string alert message. Oh, give me 1 second. Okay, so alert message. Okay, so now let's come up to here and we'll say we need to validate this structure. So let's validate the validate structure exists, and we'll pass in the target and we'll pass in the string because this is what we want to be alerted, right? And so now let's go down and let's add in a message. Whoops. And let's say validates the provided structure is not null. And then let's add in a para. Will alert user with the provided message and end script. Okay. All right. So that makes sense. So now let's, if we hover over and say, okay, so this validates the provided structure is not null. We provided it the target, so that's good. We're checking to make sure it's not null, right? Because, and if you're familiar with Eclipse, then you'll know that you don't have to select a structure target volume, right? Or a plan target volume, right? Not a structure target volume, a plan target volume. You don't have to. It can be blank or null. Like it may be in the event where you just don't have a target, you know, or whatever. Okay, so I think the next thing that we'll need to do is work on the body. All right, so for the body, we'll just do the same thing. I'm gonna get this, extract it, and we'll say get body structure. Okay. Oh, okay, so now we've got some settings. So include comments. I'm really not sure. I guess we'll just check all of them. Oh, maybe we don't want that. Okay, interesting. So I wonder how we change those settings. Well, you know what? I'll work on that later because no need to, you know, worry about that now. Okay, so let's just add this comment. Validate the target is not null. Or maybe verify. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. All right, so get the body structure. All right, the target volume, I don't think that's really necessary, so I'm going to skip that for now. I think we'll eventually delete that. All right, so let's make this. So extract method. Oh, good. Okay, so it didn't. Interesting. It didn't save that, so that's good. Okay. So So we want to know the. Let's see. Actually, you know what? We don't want to get the volume. Let's undo this. Okay. What we want to do is let's take this and put this here, and let's extract this into calculate R50. Let's do that. And then you could imagine maybe you have and we'll probably do this, we'll have a class in our class library or whatever that will be maybe like public class conformity index or conformity or something like that. And then we'll have a method inside the class that will be R50. So it'll be like, we would say conformity index dot R50, something like that, dot get R50 or something like that. Okay, so then let's go down to where that was added. Should be, there we go. So it takes in the plan, the body, and the target volume. And I think that makes sense, but instead of body, what I think is probably more reusable, let's just click apply. I'm not sure why that's popping up. Okay, so let's click, so instead of the body structure, imagine that you have a plan with 2 targets, right? And you can't just use the body structure, especially if the dose, now if you have 2 targets and then you have 2 plans, then in each individual plan, then sure, you could use the body. But let's say for whatever, you have like a multi-ISO plan, like an SRS or something like that. And, or like a single ISO SBRT, long SBRT plan that has 2 targets, right? Well, you would ideally calculate the R50 individually. Now, maybe they're so close together that you can't calculate them individually, right? So then you would have to combine them. But anyway, the point is that you may not always want to use the body. So in that case, let's say structure of interest. So like thinking about when you contour, right? Using the contouring tools and stuff, like sometimes you select your volume of interest or your region of interest, right? So similar thing here. This is a structure of interest. So let's just take that and do that, okay? And so, another thing that we could do is we could do like calculate ratio, right? So then you provide like which percentage, like whether it's 50 or 100. And you could certainly do that, but since this is like a very specific thing, like the R50, it's not like we're sometimes you want to calculate the R63. It's not really that we don't need that much flexibility. There's really only 2, right? So the calculate R50 and then the R100, or like a basic CI, and then in addition to that, we would have like maybe like the gradient index, or which is like the 50% divided by the 100%. And then, at least in some formulas or whatever. And then you might have like the paddock CI, right? So our conformity indices that we use, we don't need a whole lot of flexibility, right? So let's instead, like maybe you have another method that's calculate, ratio. And then you would just put that into here, okay? But anyway, so, and then I think instead of the target volume, because instead of forcing us to calculate that out here, let's get rid of that and let's just supply the target, because we've already given we've already gotten the target. So let's call it the plan target volume. Or no, instead of that, let's call it target structure. Okay. So let's do that, and then let's put that here, dot volume. Okay. And instead of doing all of this, let's just return this. So this divided by target structure dot volume. Okay. And then we'll just get rid of that and get rid of that. Okay, so now we are returning, and just if you want, you can, well, yeah, we'll just leave it at that, because just for, it's just a little easier to read. Now what we could do is we could move these over. I guess either way, it's a little more difficult to read since it's broken up into multiple lines, but I think that's fine. Okay, so then let's add our summary. And so this will calculate the ratio of the 50% isodose line to the target volume. Okay, and I think that should be good. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so this is complaining now because we made it just the structure instead. And then now we're going to do the same thing, but instead of, we're just going to get rid of this R100 because we're basically returning the same thing. Let's actually, well, let's keep that comment because that comment is different. And let's say, let's just get rid of that. So we'll say calculate, you are 50, and we'll say 50% IDL divided by target volume. Volume, yeah, so we actually don't need this because that doesn't make sense anymore. And we'll actually just copy this, get rid of that, and we'll say the R100, and this is the 100% isodose line divided by the target volume. Okay, and let's just come down to this calculate R50, copy it, because it's basically going to be the same, and let's see, let's change this to 100, calculate R100, 100% isodose line, plan, none of that changes. The only thing that changes is this. And then let's actually change this. Actually, we have a comment. I don't think we really need that. And I mean, we could say the volume of the 100% IDL in the structure of interest divided by the target volume. We could say something like that. And we could probably add the same thing, volume of the 50% in the, so that way if someone's reading through this and they see 50%, they know by this comment, right, that makes sense. And then obviously R50 and then the ratio of the 50%, so all that makes sense, right? And then let's say we made a mistake and we accidentally left that at 50. Well, now this person, someone's coming through and they're reading our code and they say, okay, 100%, calculate R100, that makes sense. Volume of the 100%. Oh, this says 50. That's probably not right. It's probably supposed to be 100, right? Okay, so there we go. And we'll wait on that. Okay, so now we've got the double R50 equals that. And so let's do this and change that to R100. Whoop, didn't mean to do that. Okay, so the R100. Okay, so now we're pretty much done. So then we have this message, right? Well, let's go ahead and extract it. But you know what? Let's fix this first. Okay, so the patient ID. So this is what we were talking about earlier. The only time that we use this, right, is up here. So maybe what we should do is do patient, okay, and we'll say let's because this could be useful, right? So let's actually change this to patient, and patient in the current context. And we could say, let's extract this. Whoop. I don't, gosh. I guess I do have to highlight it. Okay, let's extract this. So, very similar to how we did the get patient. But you know what? I think it actually created, no? That's weird. I wonder why. Well, that doesn't help us. That's so weird that it did that. Anyway, we'll fix it. So patient, get patient, and then we'll just say return. Okay. So we don't, I mean, this is almost taking it too far, right? Because it's kind of silly, like that we can't rely on the user, the person writing, you know, the code to say context.patient, right? Because they are just accessing an object. So they're still, you know, I don't know. This is probably a little overkill, but let's just, you know, we'll just go with it. So patient equals get patient context, okay? Okay, oh, let's add a comment or a summary or whatever. All right, gets the patient from the current context. And I guess really I could say script context. We'll just leave the others though, for the sake of time. And same thing, the only reason that we use this plan ID is for the message, right? So we've got the plan, the dose, so the max dose, right? Then the R100 and the R50, okay? Now, okay, so let's just extract this as well. And let's say patient.id, and let's do plan.id, right? Okay. So let's extract this now. And imagine like this could be like a messenger class, right? Something that would provide like messages to the user. We're not going to write that though. We're just going to write this single method or whatever. But okay, let's see. Well, let's say display conformity statistics or stats, you know, for if you wanted. Okay, so let's see, do we get we get the option to rename that. So let's do that. And so it takes in a patient, a plan, the R50 and the R100. And okay, so there's that. So let's add this. So we could say, let's see, I don't know, provides the conformity statistics from the plan. To the user and ends. Does it end? No, we didn't. Well, it does end, but it only ends because there's nothing left, right? So it will end after this runs. So we won't. That doesn't make sense. Okay. So provides a message with the conformity, and you know this is kind of silly. Let's just say displays. Displays from the plan to the user in a message box. Whoop, don't know what I just did. Oh goodness. Oh, lay down. Okay, so that's old. So okay, so it's kind of silly, but I actually tried this before, and you see my note here. the code was too small to read. So I'm actually re-recording this. And I kept the original code just so I could see how different, I wrote it the second time. But I tried to do everything from scratch and kind of follow like whatever thought process I had, along the way. Okay, so let's see. Let's just look at what we've got. Okay, actually, let's add a comment here. Display stats to user. Okay. All right, let's add some space there. Okay, so I don't think we need this. Oh, this is what I wanted to do. Okay, see, there's really no reason for us to create this variable, okay? Because we already have we have the plan, right? So we could just say target volume ID, right? There's no real reason to provide all that. And then, really, if we really wanted to take this pretty far, we're providing some logic and some flow to whoever's reading our code. So this isn't bad. If anything, it might be better, right? Because this is just the flow. So we can see, okay, so we've gotten the patient. They're getting the patient. They're getting the plan set up. They're getting the structure set. So they're getting all the things that they need, right? But let's say, so we ultimately, though, we really just come down to this. We want to provide this message, right? So what if, and this might be taking it too far. Who knows? But what if we just got rid of all that and we just copied this and we said calculate. Oh gosh, that's terrible. And display stats to user. Okay, so we know we need a patient, right? So now we give it the patient because we've already verified that there is a patient, right? And then we give it a context.plan setup. We've already checked that. And then what if we just said calculate the R50, and we know that needs a plan. Let's see. And it, really, if we wanted to see, okay, so this takes in a plan, and the plan is used here, and it will be used in here, and it will be used in here. So then it probably doesn't make sense. So we could actually, let's do that. Let's get the plan. We won't get the patient. Well, okay, let's do that. Let's just get these three things. And let's uncomment this. All right, so we got the patient, the plan, and the structure set. I think that's really all we need. We got the plan, the structure set. Oh, the structure of interest. We need the body. Okay, and we're gonna use it in two different places, so we might as well say it. We might as well, oh gosh, see, now let's see, verify. So then we verified that the target, yeah, I guess, ultimately we could add code. We could do this all in like one line of code, right? Like we could do all of this in one line. So if we wanted to do that, it would look something like, I don't think we're actually going to, because it gets a little sloppy. At least I think it does. So like if we did, okay, so this takes and this is just for fun really quick. So context.plan setup. And then we need what's the next thing? Structure of interest. So we are going to do the plan dot, do we have the plan? No, we don't. So context dot, and this is like we're making assumptions here because we haven't checked any of this. Well, I guess we've checked. Yeah, so it should be the same structure set, right? And we're going to say structures dot first or default, and then we'll say x, and it could be any letter, or you could type out structure, whatever. That's just what I'm putting. X dot icon type equals and we figured out it is external, right? Okay, so that's that. And then what else is it missing? Oh, it's missing something else. Oh, the target structure. Oof. So we would actually do something similar, or this, that says, well, let's just go ahead and let's put that down to another line. Okay, so let's paste that, and we'll say structures x dot ID. Yeah, let's add caps on. ID equals the context dot plan setup dot target volume ID. Okay, and then we need the R100, which is actually just going to be very similar to this. Okay, so calculate R50. So it needs a plan, it needs the body, and it needs the target. But instead of the R50, we're going to do the 100, right? Okay, let's get rid of that. So now we have, okay, it displays the conformity statistics to the from the plan to the user in a message box. Okay, so it takes a patient, a plan, the R50, and the R100, which we've done. So ultimately, we could get rid of all of this. So if we cut this just to see what it would look like. And now our script ultimately, and really there's nothing wrong with this. The only thing is that now, like, I don't know, I feel like this leaves a little bit out, right? But ultimately, like, this is really what we were trying to do. And I mean, I don't know. I really don't really think that there's anything wrong with this. So I think I'm going to leave this in here, and I'm going to add in, let's see. I'm going to leave it like this, and then I'm going to comment this out as, let's see, example of, one liner, something like that. Like the simplest form of what we're trying to do. Because, I mean, ultimately, yeah, I mean, we wrote a method. It takes in parameters, and then it gives us the value that we want, right? So ultimately, I mean, this is very similar to what we've been trying to do here. It's just not as broken up, right? And it doesn't have that. Okay, so that's probably the thing, is that it doesn't have any checks, right? Now it is in a try catch, so we could provide, some form of, but ultimately, like, if the target wasn't selected, we wouldn't know that the target wasn't selected, right? We would just get this message that said, sorry, something went wrong. And then it's going to leave the user who's run the script, like, no direction in what they need to do. So I think that this is probably better. And so it doesn't provide any checks. We'll say doesn't really, because we do have some checks, right? For like the plan and the stuff like that. We'll say example, the target volume is selected. So we'll say whether, right? So it doesn't really check whether or not there's actually, right? Now, I mean, we could put like an if statement or something like that, but because ultimately we know there's a body, at this point we know there's a plan set up. The only thing that we don't really know for sure is whether or not there's a target volume selected. So ultimately we could put in an if statement, like, if this is not, because this is a string, so we could say if string dot is, so actually we could just write that just so you can see. So if string dot is null or empty, And then we would put context dot plan setup dot target volume ID. So we would say if it's, so we would want to know if it's false, right? Then if it's false, like if it's not, let me use that trick again. So can I do that? Shift enter. Ooh, it even works on that. That's awesome. Okay, so then we could actually fix that. Put that here, right? So if the plan has a target volume selected, oh gosh, keyboard. Okay, so like if the plan has a target volume selected, then do this, and then else message box dot show. Please select a plan target volume. Okay. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think this one, so it starts at 70 and it goes to 87. So 17 lines of code is ultimately the same thing as from 37 or 38 to 62, you know, minus all the comments and all that stuff. So that, I mean, that in and of itself is only, what, 25 lines? But we were able to shrink that down into this, which is 17 lines. And then if you, I mean, obviously, we're not counting any of this logic, right? And that's the point. The point is that we're not concerned with the how, right? We're just concerned with like what we actually want. So that way when we're reading through our code, man, we're already at an hour. So that when we're reading through our code, we're not reading through all that junk, right? All the logic. We're just reading through the flow. So, okay, we got the patient, we got the plan, we got the structure set. Okay, so basically we're just gathering our ingredients, and then we're saying ultimately, okay, then we're going to check, and then we got the body. Oh, okay, so now we're starting to calculate some stuff. Okay, and then we just want to display it to the user, right? So, I don't know. I think now that we've written that, we've added that check into the if statement, I actually want to we could do longer example. And we could just wrap this into a region. I just hit tab. That's awesome. Longer example using, we're still using method extraction, right? And another way that you could think of that too, this is like a form of encapsulation. Right, because okay, I guess it's not technically, because we've not written this in, I don't really want to put that, because if you're getting technical, that's probably not a great example of encapsulation. But abstraction, we could put that probably. I think people would probably agree with that, right? So this would be an example of abstraction. We'll say possible example of abstraction. Okay, and let's just cut this, put this here. Okay, and you know the other thing that we could do, you know, ultimately, we could actually, this would actually be even potentially even better, is what if we extracted this? Oh, what just happened? Oh, I don't get any options? Oh. Let's try it again. There we go. Okay, I guess I didn't have something. All right, so we'll just call this display. No. Calculate. Oh gosh. And display conformity indices. Or let's just say stats. Okay. All right. So now our code is one line. Now we could have done the same thing, right? And here we could have made this our method, right? But it doesn't rely, I mean, I don't know, it's basically the same thing. But basically we just provide the script context. And, you know, honestly, this ultimately looks just like what the execute method was, right? So, you know, I mean, at some point you start to get carried away. And let's take this and put this down at the bottom. We'll say this is the shortest, so we'll go like longest to shortest, right? So let's do region tab shortest example single method, and we'll just put that there. And I'm going to comment it out. And then, so this is the longer example using method extraction. And let's just copy all of this, because that's basically where all this came from, right? And put this here. And let's comment this out. Okay. Which we don't really have to, I guess we don't want to comment all of it. So longer example, we'll say longest example using using method extraction. This isn't it's not, I mean, okay, so this was the example of the one-liner. Let me hit Control KD, just fix that. Fix the spacing there. But, I mean, we did provide checks, so I'm going to get rid of that. So if the plan is a target volume selected, you know, yada, yada, yada. So this could be, let's see, this is we'll just call this region shorter example using method extraction. But we'll say it's less broken down, because, you know, it's a little bit, we could say like slightly more redundant and probably slower, because how do you spell that? How do you spell redundant? Let's Google it. Sorry guys. Let's see. Redundant. Oh, I think we got it. All right. Okay. So it's probably a little slower too, because we're grabbing the body twice, right? So we should probably, you know, break that out and say get body, and then we're getting the target volume twice, so we should probably break that out. So at the very least, we should probably break out the target and the body, because we don't want to have to loop through and now this is fast, right? Like it's not like it's really slow, but imagine that was a slower, like more expensive calculation, then you wouldn't want to do it twice, right? You want to optimize that so that you only do it the one time. More redundant / slower. Okay. And then this, we'll just say abstracts the longer example into a single method, right? So that makes sense. So, so if we were coming through, and we'll just get rid of that because we have these regions. So, you know, you could even put the checks into it, right? But maybe not. Like maybe you want this separate, right? Because maybe you want to do other things too, besides just calculate, you know, conformity stats or something like that. So you could be like, you know, if you made this like a template or something, you could say, do stuff here, right? So validate and then do stuff here. And then, you know, provide a response to the user if something goes wrong, right? So I think, let's we'll just say calculates and displays the R100 and R50 to the user. Okay, I think that makes sense. All right. So this is turned out to be a longer video than I had planned because we kind of reworked a lot of this. You know, the stuff that we, you know, because we spent time writing the script. We could have done this up front, but I think it's important to be able to see, you know, even when you're writing simple, like a simple script, right? There's tons of ways that you can take it and make it simpler, right? And abstract a lot of that logic into methods or objects or, you know, whatever. So I think this looks good. So I think this is actually much better than my original. So I'm going to get rid of that. And the best thing is that you can see it, right? Because I'm using this 200%. Before I think it was like 100% and it was tiny. You couldn't see it. So anyway, I hope that this has been helpful. And if it has or has not been, if you feel like I've missed something or, you know, anything like that, then be sure to let me know down in the comments. But yeah, I hope it's helpful. And I think up next, I think what we'll do is we'll make this even a little bit more. We'll actually probably start over. I mean, we'll keep this code and we'll, you know, copy in what we can, that sort of thing. But I think some of it's gonna change a little bit because I'd like to do like a WPF. And I've been debating on whether or not we do like a simple view where we just have the code behind, or if we go ahead and start like doing things like quote unquote best practices, at least as far as I know, right? I'm definitely no expert, but the thing is that eventually we're going to want to build things that have multiple views. And when you start, if you keep everything in the code behind, it gets really messy, it gets really hard to change, and it gets really hard to reuse, and that sort of thing. So anyway, don't need to ramble. Thank you all very much. If you want to follow along, then be sure to like and subscribe. And until then, I'll talk to you all later.